The lawyer's voice echoes in my head like a death sentence. To my beloved granddaughter, Cassandra Blackwood, I leave my entire estate. My hands are shaking so violently I can't hold the tissue someone pressed into my palm. The mahogany conference table feels like it's tilting, and I grip the edge until my knuckles turn white. This can't be real. This can't be happening. There must be a mistake, I whisper, but my voice cracks like broken glass. The lawyer clears his throat, that awful, apologetic sound that confirms your worst nightmare. There's a small bequest for Victoria. $5,000 and a jewelry box. $5,000. Out of $2 million. For the granddaughter who spent every summer in that house, who helped build the business, who was promised everything. I taste blood where I've bitten my tongue. The room smells like old leather and betrayal, and I can hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Through the ringing, I catch the sound that destroys me completely. Cassandra is trying not to smile. Not shocked. Not surprised. Not even pretending to be confused. She's biting her lip to keep from grinning, and her eyes are bright with satisfaction. Like she's been waiting for this moment. Planning for it. The realization hits me like ice water. My own sister orchestrated this. While I mourned our grandmother, while I planned the funeral, while I grieved, she was celebrating. Everyone in this room knew except me. I stand up so fast my chair crashes backward. The sound makes everyone jump, but I barely notice. I'm drowning in their stares, choking on their pity and their guilt and their relief that they're not me. Victoria, my mother starts, but I'm already walking toward the door. I don't run. I don't cry. I don't scream. I just leave. But as I reach for the door handle, I hear Cassandra's voice behind me, sweet as poison. I'm sorry, Vicky. I know this is hard. I pause, hand frozen on the cold metal, and something inside me turns to stone. She thinks she's won. Let me take you back to before everything shattered. Back when I still believed in family. 6 months earlier, I was living what I thought was a beautiful life. Every morning at 7 a.m., I'd grab coffee from the little shop downstairs from my apartment, nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom in downtown with walls thin enough to hear Mrs. Chin practicing piano next door. The barista, Miguel, always remembered my order, medium latte, extra shot, no sugar. Small kindnesses that made me feel seen. My job at Henderson Marketing wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I specialized in campaigns for small family businesses, the kind of work that felt meaningful. Helping the corner bakery compete with chain stores, giving voice to the flower shop that had been family-owned for 3 generations. I understood what it meant to build something from nothing. But the real center of my world was Sunday dinners at Grandmother Eleanor's house. God, I can still smell that kitchen. Rosemary and butter, always rosemary and butter, because she made the same roast every week for 30 years. The Victorian mansion on Elm Street had been her pride and joy since 1987, when she bought it with money from selling her first bakery. Victoria, darling, come help me with the potatoes, she'd call, and I'd rush to her side like I had since I was 7 years old. Cassandra would already be in the dining room, setting the table with theatrical precision, making sure our parents saw how helpful she was being. She'd moved back from Portland 2 years earlier after her divorce, and everyone acted like her return was this wonderful gift to the family. But I was the one who'd never left. I was the one who visited grandmother every weekend, who helped her reorganize her business files, who drove her to doctor appointments. You have my spirit, grandmother would whisper as we worked side by side. You understand what it means to create something lasting. Those words filled a hole I didn't even know I had. My parents had always been distant, loving, but distracted. Dad with his accounting firm, Mom with her book club and charity committees. They provided for us, but they never really saw us. Grandmother Eleanor saw me. She saw my dreams of maybe starting my own marketing company someday, my quiet determination, my loyalty. Sunday dinners were sacred. We'd sit around that massive oak table, Mom and Dad discussing work, Cassandra entertaining everyone with stories from her new job at the insurance firm, and me just listening, feeling grateful to belong somewhere. Sometimes I'd catch grandmother watching me with this knowing smile, like we shared a secret. And we did, in a way. She'd started letting me handle some of her investment decisions, teaching me about the properties she owned, the stocks she'd chosen carefully over decades. Family wealth isn't just money, she'd say. It's knowledge passed down, opportunities shared. Someday, you'll understand. I thought I already understood. I thought those long conversations about her business meant something. I thought the way she lit up when I walked into a room mattered. I thought being her favorite granddaughter was a gift, not a target on my back. After dinner, we'd sit in her study while she showed me old photo albums. Pictures of her first bakery, newspaper clippings about her real estate investments, certificates from the community college where she'd taught business classes for 20 years. Her legacy spread across the coffee table like a roadmap of what hard work could build. I've been so blessed, she'd say, squeezing my hand. And I want to make sure that blessing continues. Those words warmed me for days afterward. They made my small apartment feel temporary, my modest job feel like a stepping stone. They made me believe I was part of something bigger than myself. I had no idea that every Sunday I spent feeling loved and chosen, Cassandra was building a case against me. I had no idea that my parents were listening to poison whispered in their ears, that doubt was growing like cancer in conversations I never heard. I had no idea that while I was dreaming about honoring grandmother's legacy, someone else was planning to steal it. The last Sunday before grandmother got sick, she hugged me extra long at the door. "Take care of yourself, darling," she said. "Promise me you'll always remember who you really are." I thought it was just one of her sentimental moments. Now I realize it was a warning. It started with a whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. Christmas Eve, 3 months before grandmother died. I was carrying dessert plates to the kitchen when I heard hushed voices from the hallway, my parents and Cassandra, huddled near the coat closet like conspirators. "She's too attached," Mom was saying. "It's not healthy for someone her age." "Eleanor spoiled her," Dad replied. "Made her think she's entitled to things." My hands went cold around the porcelain plates. They were talking about me. "I'm just worried about Victoria's reaction when the time comes," Cassandra's voice, dripping with fake concern. "She's always been so emotional about money." The plates rattled in my grip. Emotional about money? I'd never asked for anything. I'd never even thought about grandmother's will. I backed toward the kitchen, but Cassandra's next words stopped me dead. "The lawyer said it's all handled. Victoria will be fine. 5,000 is generous for someone who's never contributed anything real." 5,000. The exact amount I'd receive 6 months later. My heart hammered so loud I was sure they'd hear it. This conversation was happening at Christmas, but they were talking like decisions had already been made. Like grandmother was already gone. I stumbled into the kitchen, my hands shaking as I set the plates down. The familiar smell of rosemary and butter suddenly made me nauseous. "Victoria." Grandmother appeared in the doorway, her face bright with Christmas joy. "Come sit with me, darling. I have something special to show you." I followed her to the study, but my mind was spinning. Had she really already changed her will? Or were they planning to convince her? The uncertainty felt like drowning. She pulled out a small velvet box. "This was my mother's ring. I want you to have it now, while I can see you wear it." The diamond caught the lamplight, beautiful and ancient. But all I could think about was that whispered conversation. $5,000. Never contributed anything real. "Grandmother," I started, then stopped. How could I ask if she'd been lying to me for years? How could I accuse my own family of conspiracy? She slipped the ring onto my finger, her papery hands warm against mine. "Promise me something, Victoria. No matter what happens, remember that love isn't always loud. Sometimes the deepest love works in silence." At the time, I thought she was being sentimental. Now I wonder if she was trying to warn me. The ring felt heavy on my finger as we rejoined the others. Cassandra's eyes went straight to it, and something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe anger. "How lovely," she said, but her smile never reached her eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing those voices, kept feeling that ring like a weight on my hand. Something was wrong. But I was too afraid to find out what. The funeral was beautiful. Peaceful. Grandmother Eleanor would have loved seeing the church filled with people whose lives she'd touched, former employees from her bakeries, students from her business classes, neighbors she'd helped through hard times. I held it together through the service, through the burial, through the reception afterward. I was the strong granddaughter, the one everyone could depend on. Cassandra cried dramatically into tissues while I handled the logistics, accepted condolences, made sure everyone had enough food. "She's in a better place now," people kept saying, and I nodded because that's what you do. But inside, I was breaking. The woman who'd been my anchor, my champion, my future, gone. The house felt empty without her laugh echoing from the kitchen. The study felt haunted without her showing me old photographs and business documents. 5 days later, we sat in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Morrison and Associates. The same law firm that had handled grandmother's affairs for 20 years. I'd been here before, helping her update insurance policies and organize tax documents. Mr. Morrison looked older, grayer. The manila folder in front of him seemed impossibly thin for a life as full as my grandmother's. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice professionally somber. Eleanor was very specific about her wishes. I straightened in my chair. Beside me, my parents sat rigidly. Across the table, Cassandra fidgeted with her purse strap, but something about her posture bothered me. She looked prepared. Like she was waiting for good news. "The reading of the will is straightforward," Mr. Morrison continued. Eleanor Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, made her final wishes clear. My palms grew damp. This was it. The house I'd spent summers in, the business I'd helped manage, the future grandmother had always hinted at, finally real. To my beloved granddaughter, Cassandra Blackwood, I leave my entire estate, including all properties, business holdings, and financial assets, totaling approximately $1.8 million. The words hit me like physical blows. The room tilted sideways. Blood rushed from my head so fast I thought I might faint. 1.8 million. To Cassandra. "I'm sorry, there must be," my voice came out as a croak. "There is a bequest for Victoria," Mr. Morrison continued, not meeting my eyes. $5,000 and Eleanor's jewelry box, with gratitude for her companionship over the years. $5,000. Companionship. Like I was a paid companion. Like 20 years of Sunday dinners and shared dreams and whispered promises meant nothing. I looked at Cassandra, expecting to see shock, confusion, maybe even guilt. Instead, she was biting her bottom lip, trying not to smile. Her eyes sparkled with satisfaction, like she'd just won a game I didn't know we were playing. "This can't be right," I whispered, but even as I said it, pieces started falling into place. The whispered Christmas conversation. Her sudden interest in visiting grandmother more often. The way she'd started talking about financial responsibility and stability. She'd planned this. Orchestrated it. While I was grieving, she was celebrating. My mother reached across to squeeze my hand, but her touch felt hollow. "Victoria, honey, I'm sure grandmother knew you'd understand. You're so independent, so capable of taking care of yourself." The words sounded rehearsed. Like she'd been practicing this speech. My father nodded gravely. "Cassandra's been through a difficult divorce. Eleanor probably thought she needed the security more. They were all in on it. My entire family had conspired to steal my future, and they were sitting there acting like it was a mercy. I need some air," I managed, standing on unsteady legs. Victoria, wait, Cassandra's voice followed me, syrupy with fake sympathy. But I was already walking toward the door, carrying that ridiculous jewelry box like it was a consolation prize for 20 years of devotion. Outside, the April air felt like ice against my burning cheeks. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the mahogany box in my lap, before the first sob finally escaped. Grandmother's ring, the one she'd given me at Christmas, caught the sunlight streaming through my windshield. The diamond that had once felt like a promise now felt like a lie. Everything had been a lie. The woman who'd promised me the world had left me with $5,000 and a box of old jewelry. My sister had stolen my inheritance, and my parents had helped her do it. I was completely, utterly alone. I didn't go home that day. I couldn't face my empty apartment, couldn't bear the thought of calling in sick to work again, couldn't stomach the idea of pretending everything was fine. Instead, I drove to the lake where grandmother used to take me as a child. The same wooden bench overlooking the water, the same ducks gliding across the surface like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had changed. I sat there until sunset, holding that jewelry box like it contained the pieces of my shattered life. When an elderly couple walked by with their grandchildren, I smiled and nodded like a normal person. Like I wasn't dying inside. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then the next day. Then the entire week. Food poisoning, I told my boss, my voice steady over the phone while tears streamed down my face. I lived on cereal and peanut butter sandwiches because cooking felt impossible. Showering felt impossible. Answering my phone when friends called felt impossible. My apartment became a tomb. I closed the blinds and let the dishes pile up and ignored the concerned knocks from Mrs. Chen next door. The world outside kept moving, I could hear traffic, laughter, life continuing, but I was trapped in this airless bubble of betrayal. Miguel from the coffee shop texted, "Haven't seen you in a while. Everything okay?" I stared at the message for 20 minutes before typing back, "Just busy with family stuff." Family stuff. The bitter irony made me laugh, which turned into sobbing, which turned into the kind of crying that leaves you empty and raw. At night, I'd lie awake replaying every moment. Every Sunday dinner where I'd felt chosen. Every time grandmother called me her little businesswoman. Every conversation about my future, my inheritance, my place in the family legacy. All lies. Or worse, truths that had been systematically poisoned by whispers and manipulation. 2 weeks after the will reading, Henderson Marketing called. "Victoria, we understand you've been dealing with a family loss, but we need to discuss your extended absence." I sat on my unmade bed, surrounded by tissues and takeout containers, and realized I had no words. How do you explain that you can't function because your entire identity was built on quicksand? "I quit," I heard myself say. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Are you sure you want to make this decision while you're grieving? Maybe we could discuss." "I'm sure." I hung up before they could respond. That afternoon, I opened grandmother's jewelry box for the first time since the lawyer's office. Pearl earrings I remembered her wearing to church. A silver bracelet with tiny charms. A brooch shaped like a butterfly that had belonged to her mother. At the bottom, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, I found something that made my heart stop. A letter in grandmother's careful handwriting. "My dearest Victoria, if you are reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. The will they read was not the one I signed. Look for the truth in the place where we shared our secrets. I am so sorry, darling. I tried to protect what was yours, but I fear I have failed. All my love, Grandmother Eleanor." My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the paper. The will they read. Not the one she signed. I read the letter 5 times, each word branding itself into my memory. Then I pressed it against my chest and felt something crack open inside me, not more breaking, but something else. Rage. Pure, molten rage that burned away the tears and the shame and the helplessness. My grandmother hadn't betrayed me. She'd tried to warn me. which meant someone else had forged her will. Someone had systematically destroyed the future she'd planned for me. Someone was going to pay. I stood up for the first time in days and looked around my destroyed apartment. At the woman I'd become: victim, broken, defeated. That woman was done existing. I had work to do. The letter changed everything. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my breakdown, and felt something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. Not the hot, chaotic rage that had consumed me for weeks, something calculated. Surgical. My grandmother hadn't abandoned me. She'd been murdered on paper, her final wishes twisted into weapons against the person she loved most. But she'd left me a breadcrumb trail. The place where we shared our secrets. I knew exactly what she meant. The hidden compartment behind the bookshelf in her study, where she kept important documents and old family photographs. The space she'd shown me when I was 12, making me promise to never tell anyone. Every family needs someone who knows where the real treasures are hidden, she'd said with a wink. At midnight, I drove to the mansion. Cassandra's car wasn't in the driveway. She was probably out celebrating her windfall at some expensive restaurant. I used the spare key I'd had since childhood, the one hidden under the loose brick by the garden gate. The house felt different. Cold. Cassandra had already started redecorating, covering grandmother's warm floral wallpaper with stark white paint. It felt like watching someone erase a person's soul. In the study, I moved the bookshelf exactly as grandmother had taught me. The hidden panel slid open, revealing a manila envelope thick with documents. My hands trembled as I opened it. The real will. Dated 3 months after the fake one, leaving everything to me. Bank statements showing irregular withdrawals from grandmother's accounts. Correspondence with lawyers I'd never heard of. And at the bottom, a small cassette recorder with a note: insurance policy. V will understand. I pressed play. My grandmother's voice filled the room, weak but determined. This is Eleanor Blackwood, and I'm recording this because I fear my family is trying to manipulate my final wishes. Cassandra has been pressuring me to change my will, claiming Victoria is irresponsible with money. This is false. Victoria is the only one who truly understands what I've built and why it matters. My knees gave out. I sank into grandmother's chair, listening to her describe months of psychological manipulation. Cassandra visiting alone, filling her ears with lies about my gambling problems and unstable relationships. My parents nodding along, convinced that I was somehow unworthy of the legacy I'd helped build. They think I'm a foolish old woman, grandmother continued. But I see clearly. I'm changing my will back to its original form, and I'm recording this as proof of my mental competency. If something happens to me before I can tell Victoria the truth, I pray she'll find this recording and fight for what's rightfully hers. The tape ended. The silence felt deafening. I photographed every document. Copied every recording. Memorized every detail. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and slipped out of the house like a ghost. Back home, I didn't call the police. I didn't hire a lawyer. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I got dressed for the first time in weeks, styled my hair, and applied for a job at Morrison & Associates, the law firm that had read the fake will. I'm very interested in estate law, I told them during the interview, my voice steady and professional. Particularly cases involving elder fraud and inheritance disputes. They hired me as a paralegal within the week. For the next 6 months, I became the perfect employee. Eager, dedicated, always volunteering for extra research. I learned about forgery detection, financial fraud investigation, and elder abuse cases. I built relationships with investigators, forensic accountants, and criminal attorneys. And I watched Cassandra from a distance. She'd sold grandmother's bakery chain for quick cash, something grandmother never would have wanted. She'd quit her insurance job and started living like a lottery winner. New car, expensive clothes, a boyfriend who'd appeared the moment her bank account grew 7 figures. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she'd committed the perfect crime. But she'd underestimated the girl who used to help grandmother organize business files. The granddaughter who'd learned that the most dangerous enemies are the ones who smile while they sharpen their knives. I wasn't going to scream or rage or demand justice. I was going to serve it, ice cold and airtight, with all the patience grandmother had taught me. The trap was already set. Cassandra just didn't know she was walking into it. 6 months into my paralegal job, I made my first move. I'd been watching Cassandra's financial patterns, learning her habits, studying her weaknesses. She was sloppy with money, spending grandmother's inheritance like it was endless, making impulsive purchases that left digital trails everywhere. The bank audit started with an anonymous tip I'd carefully crafted during my lunch break. Suspicious financial activity in the Eleanor Blackwood estate, I'd written. Irregular withdrawals before death, potential elder financial abuse. I knew exactly which keywords would trigger an investigation. I'd processed enough fraud cases to speak their language. 3 days later, Cassandra called me for the first time since the will reading. Victoria. Her voice was strained, artificially bright. I hope you're doing better. I know this has been hard for both of us. I stirred my coffee, watching steam curl up from the cup. I'm managing. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, exactly. There's just some kind of audit happening with Grandma's accounts. Probably routine, but it's stressing me out. I thought maybe we could meet for lunch. Support each other through this family stuff? Family stuff. The same words I'd used to lie to Miguel months ago. Of course, I said, my voice warm with false sympathy. We should stick together. We met at the cafe near her new house, a trendy place with $15 salads that screamed new money. Cassandra looked tired, her designer handbag clutched too tightly, her smile too wide. The bank is asking all these questions, she said, picking at her arugula. About Grandma's mental state, about who had access to her accounts. It's so invasive. I nodded sympathetically while my pulse quickened. They were following the breadcrumbs I'd left. They even wanted to know about any recordings or documents she might have left behind. Can you imagine? Like she was some paranoid old woman making conspiracy tapes. My blood turned to ice. She knew about the recorder. Which meant she'd been back to the study, searching for evidence. That does sound intrusive, I managed. But I'm sure everything will work out fine. You have nothing to hide, right? Her laugh was too sharp. Of course not. I just worry about how all this scrutiny might affect the family. Mom and Dad are already stressed. I watched her fidget with her bracelet, a new piece, probably worth more than my monthly rent. The woman who'd stolen my inheritance was worried about family stress. I should probably mention something, I said carefully. I found some old papers when I was cleaning out my apartment. Legal documents, financial stuff. Nothing important, probably, but if the investigators ask. Cassandra went very still. What kind of documents? Oh, just copies of things Grandma showed me over the years. Investment records, will drafts. I always helped her organize paperwork, you know. The color drained from her face. Will drafts? I let the silence stretch, watching her panic bloom like a toxic flower. Should I turn them over to the bank? I asked innocently. If they're investigating, they probably want to see everything. No. The word exploded out of her. Other diners turned to look. She lowered her voice, leaning across the table. I mean, that's not necessary. Those old papers would just confuse things. Grandma changed her mind about so many things near the end. There it was. The admission I needed. You're probably right, I said, pulling out my phone. Though the investigator I spoke with seemed really interested in any documentation from the last year of her life. You spoke with an investigator? Just briefly. They called everyone who spent time with Grandma. I mentioned you'd been visiting her a lot more in those final months. How devoted you were. Cassandra's hands shook as she reached for her water glass. I think I need to go, she whispered. I watched her hurry out of the cafe, her expensive heels clicking frantically against the tile floor. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the will reading. The fake sympathy. The way she'd tried not to smile while my world collapsed. The predator was becoming the prey, and she was finally starting to understand how it felt to be hunted. But this was just the beginning. I had so much more planned for my dear sister. The real storm was still coming. 1 year after grandmother's death, I walked into the FBI field office with a briefcase full of evidence. I believe my family committed inheritance fraud, I told Special Agent Martinez, my voice steady as stone. And I have proof. For 6 months, I'd built an airtight case. Bank records showing the systematic draining of grandmother's accounts. Forged signatures on legal documents. Audio recordings proving mental manipulation. Financial expert analysis of the fraudulent will. I didn't just go to the FBI. I contacted the District Attorney's Office, the State Bar Association, the IRS, and Channel 7 News. This is a complex case of elder financial abuse, I explained to each investigator. My grandmother left clear evidence that her final will was forged. The dominoes fell faster than I'd expected. On a Tuesday morning, I sat in a coffee shop across from the mansion, watching through the window as federal agents rang the doorbell. I'd positioned myself perfectly, close enough to see everything, far enough away to remain invisible. Cassandra answered the door in her silk robe, coffee mug in hand. Her face went white when she saw the badges. 20 minutes later, she emerged in handcuffs. The local news crew was already there, cameras rolling as my sister stumbled down the front steps. Her designer robe looked ridiculous against the backdrop of her public humiliation. I didn't do anything wrong, she screamed at the reporters. This is a mistake. Someone's lying about me. I sipped my latte and watched her world crumble in real time. That afternoon, I drove to the police station. I'm Victoria Blackwood, I told the desk sergeant. I believe I have information relevant to the Cassandra Blackwood case. Agent Martinez met me in a small conference room, his expression professional but kind. I understand this must be difficult, he said. Turning in family members requires courage. My grandmother deserves justice, I replied simply. She trusted me to protect her legacy. I handed over the original documents, everything I'd found in the secret compartment. The real will. The recordings. The evidence of systematic manipulation. How long have you known about this fraud? Martinez asked. Since the night she died, I lied smoothly. I've been gathering evidence ever since, trying to understand the full scope of the conspiracy. He nodded, impressed by my thoroughness. This is exceptional detective work. Most families try to cover up this kind of thing. My sister stole from a dying woman, I said. There's no family loyalty that trumps justice. 2 hours later, I walked out of the police station feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone rang immediately. Mom. Victoria, what have you done? Her voice was shrill with panic. I've done what grandmother would have wanted, I said calmly. I've protected her final wishes. Cassandra is your sister. Cassandra is a criminal. And so are you and Dad, for helping her. Silence stretched between us, thick with years of unspoken resentment. You've destroyed this family, Mom whispered. No, I said, my voice steady as a judge's gavel. You destroyed this family the day you decided I was worth $5,000. I hung up and blocked their number. That evening, I drove to the mansion one last time. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze, and the house looked smaller somehow, stripped of its power to intimidate me. I stood in the garden where grandmother had taught me to plant roses, where she'd promised me a future I'd had to fight to claim. Justice served, I whispered to her memory. For the first time in a year, I felt peace. The war was over. And I had one. The news called it the Blackwood inheritance scandal. Within a week, Cassandra's perfect life became a cautionary tale broadcast across 3 counties. Her mugshot appeared on every local channel, her designer lifestyle dissected by financial crime reporters who painted her as the greedy sister who preyed on a vulnerable elderly woman. The boyfriend disappeared first. Marcus, the handsome investment banker who'd swept her off her feet 6 months after she inherited millions, vanished the moment her accounts were frozen. No goodbye text, no explanation. Just an empty closet where his expensive suits used to hang. The house went next. Federal asset forfeiture meant the mansion I'd grown up in was now evidence in a criminal case. Cassandra had to move back in with our parents, sleeping in her childhood bedroom like a disgraced teenager. I drove by their house once and saw her through the kitchen window, washing dishes in old clothes while Mom stood behind her with crossed arms. The woman who'd stolen my inheritance was now scrubbing plates she couldn't afford to replace. The criminal charges came in waves. Wire fraud, elder financial abuse, conspiracy, tax evasion, forgery. Each new indictment made headlines, each court appearance documented by reporters who'd grown fascinated by the story of family greed and ultimate justice. Her lawyer, the same corrupt attorney who'd helped forge grandmother's will, was disbarred and arrested as a co-conspirator. No plea deals, no reduced sentences. The evidence was too overwhelming. I watched it all unfold from my new apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom place with hardwood floors and windows that actually let in sunlight. I'd used my legitimate inheritance to buy furniture that made me smile, a reading chair by the window, bookshelves for the business novels grandmother had recommended, a kitchen table where I could eat meals that weren't cereal or takeout. Miguel from the coffee shop barely recognized me when I returned after months of absence. "You look different," he said, studying my face with curious kindness. Lighter, somehow. He was right. The weight I'd been carrying, the doubt, the shame, the feeling that maybe I really didn't deserve love, had lifted somewhere between the FBI interviews and watching Cassandra's public humiliation. I thought betrayal had broken me, shattered some essential part of my identity that could never be repaired. Instead, it had revealed who I really was underneath the people-pleasing, underneath the desperate need for family approval. I was Eleanor Blackwood's granddaughter. I had her steel spine, her strategic mind, her capacity for playing the long game until justice was served. The real will was validated within 3 months. The house, the investments, the remaining business assets, everything became mine, exactly as grandmother had intended. But more than the money, I inherited something precious, the knowledge that I was exactly who she believed I was. Strong enough to survive betrayal. Smart enough to fight back. Patient enough to win. I started taking business classes at the community college where grandmother had once taught. The same building, sometimes the same classrooms where she'd shared her knowledge with students who reminded her of herself, people who understood that real wealth comes from building something lasting. My instructor, Professor Williams, pulled me aside after the 3rd week. "You have exceptional instincts for this," he said. "Have you considered starting your own firm?" I smiled, thinking of Sunday dinners and whispered promises about family legacies. "Actually, yes. I have some ideas about helping small businesses with marketing and financial planning. The kind of work that would have made grandmother proud. The kind of future she'd always seen for me, even when I couldn't see it myself." Sometimes I drive past the courthouse where Cassandra's trial is scheduled to begin. I don't go inside, I've given all the testimony I need to give. But I think about her sitting in that defendant's chair, finally understanding that actions have consequences. That betrayal is a two-way street. And some people are much better at traveling it than others. Today, I'm sitting in Grandmother Eleanor's study, my study now, writing the final chapter of this story. The mahogany desk where she used to show me investment portfolios is covered with business plans for my new marketing firm. The hidden compartment behind the bookshelf is empty, its secrets finally served their purpose. The house feels warm again, filled with the scent of rosemary and butter from my Sunday roasts. 3 years ago, I walked out of a lawyer's office carrying a jewelry box and $5,000, believing my family had abandoned me. I thought love was conditional, that I'd somehow failed to earn what was promised. I was wrong about everything except the abandonment. Yesterday, I received a letter from Cassandra. Prison stationery, careful handwriting, 5 pages of apologies and excuses. She's sorry for the pain she caused. She hopes I can find forgiveness. She wants to rebuild our relationship when she's released in 7 years. I read it twice, then fed it to the fireplace. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some betrayals are too calculated, too cruel to deserve redemption. She didn't steal from me in a moment of weakness, she orchestrated months of psychological manipulation against a dying woman who trusted her. That kind of evil doesn't get a second chance. But I do. Every morning, I wake up in the house where grandmother taught me that patience and intelligence could build empires. Every evening, I sit in her favorite chair, planning the business that will help small family companies protect themselves from people like my sister. The woman who thought she'd stolen my future gave me something better, the knowledge of who I really am when everything is stripped away. Eleanor Blackwood's true granddaughter. Strategic, unbreakable, and perfectly capable of playing the longest game of all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served hot or cold. Sometimes it's served with perfect, patient precision, and a smile they never see coming. The inheritance was never just money. It was justice. And justice always finds its way home.